If you'd told me 1 year ago that I'd be leaving my corporate London life behind to move to rural Gloucestershire to renovate a period cottage all on my own with no experience, I would have said that's nonsense.
And over the last 12 months, this place has shaped us in ways we didn't fully expect. Not dramatically, not overnight, just quietly, steadily. The kind of change you only notice when you stop and look back.
In this video, we'll show you what we've actually done, what's to come in the future, and we'll be making plans for what comes next.
Let me introduce you to the story of how we watched far too many DIY programs and then found ourselves in an episode of our very own. 1 minute you're watching someone on TV knock down walls, and the next you're ankle deep in rubble wondering if you're capable of replacing everything you've just torn down. We stumbled across this place by accident. It was a listing 200 miles away in an understated village in the Forest of Dean, surrounded by the nature where the sheep roam free and a place that is rich in opportunity. We viewed it once and fell in love instantly, then put an offer in before seeing anything else. Whether houses can speak to you or not, this one definitely tapped us on the shoulder and said, "Come on in." The cottage itself probably dates back to the late 1800s. It would have been home to local foresters or miners back then, but now it's home to us, and the plan was simple: move in, fix it up slowly, and then figure out the admin of the relocation later on.
So the purchase of this property didn't exactly go to plan, and that's because I was made redundant the day after we picked up the keys. I'll let Julia, the financial advisor, tell you exactly why that's a problem just after you've committed to a mortgage.
Now, luckily, this happened after we exchanged contracts and completed. If it happened before, we would have risked losing this purchase. However, now it means that we need to work really hard, maintaining those monthly mortgage payments, not to lose our home.
So before we knew it, we were packing up, ready to start again, completely from scratch.
And that's how this story starts. The past year has been messy, exhausting, and genuinely life-changing, and it's only just getting started. Before we share what we've actually achieved, let's have a glimpse at what's planned for the future, the big stuff, the sort that we need to go through the planning process for.
As much as we're restoring life back into this old cottage, we know that we can create the ultimate home. The goal is to create something that isn't over-modernised, but something that is timeless and fits into this countryside landscape. We'd like to extend out into the garden to form an L shape that allows us to overlook the forest.
It would become a place where the old stone meets something sleek and new, sympathetic yet confident. It's not about size, it's about perspective, and finally being able to enjoy that view that the original builders turned their back on.
So, out there, if you come with me, is where the sun hits throughout the day. And this is exactly where we would like to build an outdoor barbecue area that's sheltered in the winter and open in the summer. Let's have a look. We'll need to make sure that the barbecue and pizza oven is fit for Julia's Italian family, who I'm sure will inspect it closely, no doubt, and then we can play hosts to family and friends. Lastly, at that end of the garden, there's room for something special, so let's check it out. Watch your step. The Forest of Dean is home to a heritage railway, and out here I'd like to rescue an old carriage or wagon and turn it into a guest space, and it will be magnificent. And to be honest, it'll be in keeping with the area, and dull old me would just like to look at it endlessly. Back to the house. So that's all the future, and that's why I say the renovation isn't the end, it's just the start.
When we first moved in, we thought we'd live here quietly whilst we both found new jobs, but that fantasy only lasted about a week. The house came with a condemned back boiler with a warning notice that said it was at risk of explosion. And the winter was coming in fast, so before we even unpacked properly, we had to install a completely new central heating system. We started by stripping the wallpaper to prep for hanging the radiators, except the wallpaper wasn't hiding paint, it was hiding cracks and plaster that was no longer attached to the wall. This meant I'd now signed myself up to learn plastering from scratch overnight, and we had to use lime plaster because of the solid stone walls and no damp-proof course.
Then you gotta plaster it.
So picture this, a desk guy at midnight mixing buckets of various lime and sand whilst trying to keep up with YouTube tutorials and wondering why the wall is actively fighting me back. Let's just say more than a few tears were shed. About £10,000 later, we had radiators and an empty savings account, and on top of that, the house looked like a war zone. The floors were up, fused into the rooms below, and the remnants of dropped plaster in every room. Our house was officially a work site. That was the first big lesson this place gave me. Nothing moves quickly, and sometimes that's the point. In my old job, everything was about speed and delivery. Here, the house sets the pace. Freshly confident after surviving the heating system, we decided to just take down the chimney to open up the kitchen layout. In our heads, it was a quick tidy up job and we'd be ready to fit the kitchen the following week, but in reality, it was a cloud of dust so thick you couldn't see across the room. Every surface, every cup, every plate, even inside of the kettle had a fine layer of regret on it. That's when we realised we were in deeper than we thought. Living inside our own building site sounded romantic up until you try eating dinner next to a pile of bricks. To be brutally honest with you, this was a tough clean-up operation and our morale took a bit of a hit. I look back now and ask myself what on earth did we expect? Anyway, we needed to get out, so we escaped into the garden. We didn't go out there with a plan. The garden looked like something out of the Lost World. Waist-high grass, brambles and some random scrap and hopefully no forgotten sheep. We grabbed 2 petrol strimmers and honestly, they're the most fun tools I've ever used. Definitely a top 10 power tool for me.
Why didn't you show us where we are? Because we've been cutting this down for a long time and there's one thing we can do in this garden which we could never do. We can actually go from front to back through the left-hand side of the garden.
4 kilometers. Okay. All done today
Right.
in these grounds. Whoa! Are you okay?
It was the first time in weeks we felt like we were actually making progress rather than just undoing problems. As the overgrowth came down, we really started to see the shape of the garden and it just kept going and going. And with every metre cleared, more possibilities started forming in the back of our minds. I don't think the local sheep appreciated us reclaiming their land though. One of them in particular took a really personal dislike to Julia. We couldn't stay outside forever, so it was time to get back to business. And back to business meant electrics, because our wires were thread through the window frames and draped along the front of the house, and that just didn't inspire us with much confidence. It didn't take us long to realise that things weren't up to modern standards. We were told the lighting circuit didn't have an earth, which meant we couldn't safely use the metal fittings we'd already purchased. In fact, half of the house was running off a spur, which might have explained why there was only 1 socket per room. So we made the executive decision to do it properly and have the whole house rewired. We worked closely with our electrician on the layout, where we would want light switches when entering a dark room, and where we would charge things and how we would move through the space. It's the kind of decision making you don't see in the finished result, but it affects how comfortable the house is to live in. By the time those electrics were done, the house looked like it had been surgically opened, but it was finally safe, and that was worth every hole in the wall. With the winter fast approaching, we turned our attention to creating a lounge so that we would have somewhere else to reside other than the 1 bedroom that we were currently confided in at this moment in the renovation. This room was hiding a period feature behind that plaster, and once we started stripping it back, we uncovered the original stone fireplace.
1, 2, 3. Hold! Whoa!
It was buried behind blockwork and God knows how many years of dust. Breaking through it was really brutal. Trip after trip hauling out rubble, eating dust for dinner and wondering if the stonework was even salvageable. At least this time the dust was anticipated. But once we'd restored the stone thanks to a bit of sandblasting and Julia's point in perfection, it really felt like we'd uncovered a piece of the cottage's personality. Before we could relax though, we had to plaster over all of the new electrical chasing and the Ethernet runs that will eventually feed what will be the world's most smart tech cottage. If you're intrigued by all that smart home stuff, you'll want to subscribe to follow when we get to this part. Perhaps I was getting a bit carried away by the thought of completion. I stupidly ripped up the remnants of the not so parquet flooring without a face mask, and don't be like me, always use PPE. With older properties, practically all construction materials seem to have poisonous contents. So to brighten things up, we gave everything a lick of outrageously expensive breathable clay paint to get this room fit for living. And we got close, just not quite close enough. But without flooring, it was still unfinished. So we had to leave it for when this entire downstairs was ready so that we could seamlessly link each room together without a threshold. But that would have to wait until after the long Christmas break. After months of living in the construction zone, we hit a wall. Mentally, not structurally. So we took a break. and with some distance we realised we've made things so much harder than they needed to be. Trying to live in a renovation slowed us down more than anything. Every job required us to move boxes from one room to another, and every bit of dust settled inside the cupboards and on the clothes. Every evening ended with sweeping and re-sweeping instead of progressing. And in hindsight, a static caravan would have felt like a 5-star hotel, but like everything else this year, we've learnt by doing, and doing it the hard way. By March, we needed to ease ourselves back in with something manageable, and that was planting a hedge for privacy. Because up until then, it felt like we were performing on a stage every time we stepped into the garden. So we went ahead and ordered 45 shrubs, and as we were ready to dig the trench, we then discovered the sewer manor was exactly where the hedge needed to be. I mean, of course it would be. So instead, we needed to shift the hedge line, and we had to tear up our entrance path we used to get into our house, and I can still feel the vibrations from that breaker to this very day. All of the noise was gathering someone wanted attention, and that sheep seems really familiar. I think it's been tracking down Julia. This is the big one. It's the kitchen, and it's the heart of the house, and we've already made a mess of it during that earlier chimney debacle. And with our confidence back up but our budget running low, we decided to do as much of it as humanly was possible. No wall, ceiling or floor in this room was going to be untouched, and first up, we sorted out the mess of the chimney removal whilst preserving as much character as possible. We also wanted to use the space to fit in something special. To accommodate the kitchen we designed, we needed to reinforce that stud wall to take the weight of the wall units, so we simply boarded over with ply sheets and more plasterboard. Hiding underneath that lino flooring was those typical asbestos-sized tiles, so we removed them ourselves, but we did exercise way more caution than we did earlier in this project. Fortunately, they came off with a little bit of persuasion and a lot of steam. I give this job at a push 3 out of 10. It's sweaty and potentially life-threatening. Then we overboarded that Artex ceiling with fire-rated plasterboard. Every sheet weighed an absolute ton. These would also require plastering, which already challenged my already limited skill set. For the first coat on the ceiling, I thought I'd made a huge mistake with an out-of-date batch, but by the second, it started looking acceptable. Plastering is about timing, discipline, and knowing when to leave it alone. Fitting the kitchen was another skill set entirely. It's not what you see, it's the invisible stuff. It's the reinforcements, the perfect spacing, and the fight against walls that aren't square. But slowly, our antique pink kitchen came together, and it was the first time the house started to feel like ours as each room began to tie together. This room will become our dining room, and compared to the kitchen, this room felt like a holiday because we could just crack on with it. First we had to remove the peculiar plasterboarding that was on top of the wallpaper which we needed to strip, and that's a job for Julia because she was conveniently paired up with that one. Then, a not so quick skim on the wonky wall that took me a lot longer than I would like to admit, and a bit, or should I say a lot of ruckus, with a bit of coving that had me screaming about how much I hated that job.
I found it. I finally found it. It's been a year, and despite being able to overboard a roof, plaster walls, uncover an old chimney and install a kitchen, the one thing that really got me is that.
That said, a fresh coat of paint and phase 1 of that room is done. Well, almost done. It just needed flooring, and that meant we could finally link the entire of the downstairs together. We bought laminate in bulk, so we're laying it across the entire house, and that means no thresholds, just continuous flow, partly for simplicity, but mostly for budget. I suppose we'll see how waterproof laminate is because we've even used it in the bathroom. Just a bit of skirting trim to tidy everything up before we could say the job is done, and that's when something clicked. For the first time in almost a year, we could walk around the house barefoot. No more dust, no more exposed floorboards, and no rubble. Now this place really feels just like home, and it was our moment to step back and take a look at what sits on top of all of those layers of problem solving.
Just 12 months ago, I was stuck in a world that demanded more. Work faster, deliver quicker, and don't question anything. And in that noise, my attention span and sense of self have both took a hit. So this cottage has forced me to slow things down. You can't rush solid stone walls, and you can't ask lime plaster to dry any faster, and you certainly can't ask a 140-year-old building to cooperate with you. It teaches you patience whether you like it or not. And in that slow pace, I found my focus. It's not a dramatic transformation, but it's a slow movement back to the person who I'm supposed to be. Someone who creates things, someone who solves problems, and most of all, someone who gives back. Whether that's restoring this old house or making these videos that inspire, hopefully, one of you to take on that project that you've been meaning to for years. So here we are today, and if downstairs has been about survival, then upstairs is about purpose. We'll just ignore this staircase for now because it needs a complete rethink. Into this room. This will be our first big project we're going to undertake upstairs, and it's going to be a home office. We thought the biggest problem was in this corner with a big damp patch, but little did we know underneath all the wallpaper was something worse. Now, we need to fully transform this room to make it suit our needs, and we're going to be pulling up the floorboards and putting in sound deadening, Ethernet ports, lighting solutions, something that makes us look like we're actually working from a decent home space rather than some sort of artificial intelligence background. So this room really will be the true Swiss Army knife of home office / bedroom, because in the future, I think we'll be turning back. Moving on, down the hallway, we're going over to the middle room, which is the smallest room. In here, we're going to be converting Aladdin's cave into the most clever, intelligent storage space you've ever seen, because it needs it, and it's the only place we can put a wardrobe. If I swap around with Julia, and I stand here and bring you into the room, where we removed the chimney breast, we now have this extra floor space to play with, and we can make this into a feature vanity unit. But we can't ignore the fact that this door is placed right in the middle of the room, which means there's nowhere to place a bed. So we need to think of how we're going to come over this solution, either by moving the door or putting a pocket door in, dependent on building control. So last but not least, in here is the master bedroom, and it's got no right being this big in a cottage of this age. So if we firstly look up at this Artex ceiling, we need to plaster over that, because I don't really fancy overboarding it again after the whole saga in the kitchen. But once we do that, we can put in some spotlights, and that'll be great because it will complement our fancy electrical wiring, where we can control all the lights directly from the bed. If we go over here, this is the ensuite, and this is good because we've never had one before, except it does look like something straight out of the 60s, so we need to rip all of it out, and we'll get some design flair and make something pretty, hopefully, impressive. And if we fail, only you lot are going to see it. But next to it is a walk-in wardrobe. Now this is exciting because Julia can put all of her clothes in here along with my 3 t-shirts. And we're going to come up with some really clever storage solutions that mean we can walk straight in, grab what we want without any obstructions. But we do need to address the fact that this window is going to fade all our clothes, so we'll come up with some automated techie stuff to open and shut that blind when there's sun. So there's a lot to do, and we're excited for all of it. So if you want to join us on this journey, hit subscribe. It's going to help me out more than you know, and we'll show you everything. So just like that, thank you for watching, and here's to the next 12 months.